Hi everyone, my name is Dr. Agatha Morello and I'm a postdoctoral resident at the Nova Southeastern University Mailman Siegel Center, specifically their Developmental Assessment Clinic. Today I'm going to be discussing playing with your child with Autism Spectrum Disorder. And what is it that we will be discussing today? I'm going to talk about what is play and why is it so important. I'm also going to be reviewing the elements of social play and engagement, and I'm going to be discussing how to play and what does that look like when you're engaging and playing with your child. So for starters, what is play? What does that look like for us when we're engaging? So play, according to Google, it's a verb, and it means to engage in an activity for enjoyment and recreation rather than a serious or practical purpose. And here I want to point out that when we are playing, right, it's this element of fun, this element of enjoyment, and really not so much heavily emphasized on making sure we know our alphabets, making sure that we know 2 + 2 = 4. We're really just focusing on the relationship here. And why is it important? So it is a time for learning. And when we think of play, especially for children, this is how they learn about the world. This is how they explore different actions and consequences and learn that if I do so-and-so with my dolly, this happens. It's almost like a little mini universe for them to explore. Other than that, they are also learning lessons in physics, right? So learning about their own bodies and their own capabilities, whether it's running or jumping or climbing. It's also good for learning vocabulary. And when we think about playing, right, an adult with a child, we're talking to them. We're labeling what they're doing, right? We're labeling the objects of what they're playing with. We're giving words to their actions. And through imitation, right, we're hoping that children see us use language and they will further enrich their language and learn from us. Right? And here's where we see maybe children starting developing short phrases, maybe copying what they're hearing from the parent, learning to also label that this is cow, this is dog. So definitely play is very important in terms of expanding the child's vocabulary and language skills. This is also a good time to practice math and analytical skills. And here when I'm talking about math and analytical skills, I'm not perhaps talking about the very specific of 2 + 2 = 4. Let's sit together and let's count how many animals we have. This is more real life, in the moment, practical skills where, maybe there's only 2 cows, 2 toy cows, and there's 3 children who each want to have a cow. So how is the child going to be able to share and take turns with other children? And maybe I'll have a turn with the cow and then I'll give it to Timmy, and being able to spread the toys out like that, right? We also have opportunities, such as puzzles, as you see here. There's puzzles, there's an abacus, really helping them learn to identify, simple counting procedures as well. And then this is also very helpful for visual spatial understanding. So similarly to this picture, when a child is using construction toys such as blocks, Legos, we're really helping them expand on the planning, right? So the visual planning, being able to say, okay, this block goes here, and then we stack another one on top, and in order to create this tower. So this will be very helpful for them. So what are some of these elements of social play and engagement that we're looking at? So first, I'm just going to go over them in general, but we're going to go we're going to discuss them each individually, right? So we have imitation, we have shared interest, we have eye contact, joint attention, and turn taking, right? And all of these are very important in order to really engage and share in that back and forth with someone. And I'm going to talk about each of them individually and what that looks like. In terms of imitation, I love this image here because you see you know, this is the man, he's sticking out his tongue, the baby's sticking out the tongue, the man's opening his mouth, the baby. So really, you know, children are copying us and mirroring our responses. And then in this next picture, you see, you know, so mommy's on the phone and she's talking to someone, and the child picks up a phone and is mirroring her actions. And when we think of imitation, this is perhaps one of the simplest ways in which a child can learn to explore different items, and they learn from us, right? So we're modeling for them how to do that. And when we're thinking about individuals on the spectrum, this may be difficult for them to do, to imitate you, whether it's being able to attend to what you're doing or mirroring back what they're seeing. So we definitely want to encourage through the play the imitation, where you're modeling for them a behavior, whether it's picking up an object and putting it to your ear and seeing if they can also imitate as well, making faces with them, really helping them gain that skill. In terms of shared interest, so here we're talking about enjoyment, right? We want to connect with someone. In this image, we see mommy and baby playing patty cake, and it's something that they're both interested in doing. The baby's engaged with mom, mom is smiling at the child. This is something that they can both enjoy together. And especially for when we're thinking about individuals on the spectrum who maybe have particular interests, whether it's Elmo or Thomas the Train, we want to make sure to engage in our children in something that they like too. And maybe if it's Thomas the Train, both of us are pushing the train together, really enriching that relationship between the two of you through the shared interest. And this is also very helpful, excuse me, in terms of turn taking and collaborating with peers. Because when you're thinking about playing with other kids their age, you know, not everyone's going to have the same interests in terms of what it is that they want to do in the game, but maybe they have something in common and they can further explore that. Eye contact. So this one's a little bit tricky, right? So when we're thinking about eye contact, we really hope that our children are being able to make eye contact with us and look at us and almost engage in that back and forth and further facilitate the imitation, the enjoyment, the interest. But what happens if our children don't make eye contact with us, right? This can be tricky, especially for individuals on the spectrum who maybe their eye contact is limited or it's fleeting, where they look at you very quickly and then they quickly look away, or it's only limited to when they're requesting objects. And we're not saying to force the child to create eye contact, but use things to your advantage. If you know that they like or they're very interested in this pink little pig toy, right? And you want to engage with them and make eye contact, maybe holding up that toy that they've been looking at for a while, right up to your eyes, right? And smiling at them and saying, oh, good eye contact, and reinforcing the eye contact, right? Or even if we have a child who very much enjoys bubbles, and perhaps they're having a hard time making eye contact while they're requesting. For them, they're probably saying, bubble, bubble, and they're not really looking at you, or they're reaching towards the bubbles, but not really requesting, right? So you can maybe hold up the bubble wand towards your eye, make sure that they're making eye contact with you. You want bubbles? Okay. Hold it up towards your eye, make sure they're looking at you, and then reinforce with the blowing of the bubbles. So in terms of joint attention, so what is that? So this is the ability to coordinate attention between people and objects. So when we respond to joint attention by following the gestures and gaze of another person to share the object of that other person's attention. So here is when we're trying to direct someone's attention for social purposes. So perhaps when I'm thinking about child, parent, and maybe an object that the child is interested in or is amazed by. So maybe it's one of these like animatronic animals that are moving around and the child is so excited by it, right? What are we talking about with joint attention? The child is looking at the animatronic animal, excited, and looking over at mom, kind of like, hey, do you see that? Do you see how cool that is? And engaging in that triangle that we call that involves joint attention in order to share the excitement or share with the object that the person is attending to, right? This can also be used for social purposes, right? So if they want to get something, you know, when we're thinking about a child who maybe isn't requesting appropriately, so like I mentioned earlier, they're either grabbing or vocalizing but not really integrating with eye contact, we want to be able to model for them, you know, being able to look at the object or maybe point at the object and then look back at us and request for it. um, you know, the cornerstone for development of intentionality and language development, this is what it is, because we're showing that we are, with our eye contact, with maybe that pointing, we're intentionally sharing with someone, intentionally requesting, and if we're coordinating that with language, that's helping us be able to connect the request with the point, right? Rather than just pointing at something without any understanding of what the purpose is for. And this is really essential for initiating the social communication interaction, right? So again, I'm thinking about a child who is at a zoo or at a museum with their parent, or even when they're playing a game and they're very interested in something, right? You know, that they're interested in something, but they want to initiate and share that interest with someone else, or they want to initiate play with someone else. Perhaps the child is looking at that swing set, looking at that animal, looking at that toy barn, and then looking over at mom kind of, or dad, and being like, look, you know, like, I like that, like, wow, you know, let's go look at it more. So this is initiating that social communication. So here, before we watch this video, you know, this is a child, this is a good example of joint attention. And in this video, I want you to notice a child is going to attempt 2 times to engage their parent in joint attention. So I'm going to play this for you. Okay, so when we're looking at that video and we're looking at those 2 times where the child engaged in joint attention, what did we notice? We are noticing that this child is using joint attention. The first time, she pointed at the object, at the picture in the book, and then she looks up at mom. So it's almost like in a way to communicate, like, look what I saw, right? To engage mom and pull her in, right? The second time I saw her do it was when she closed the book and then she looks at mom. So almost like that social cue, that signal to say, I'm done, like, book's over, I'm done. So again, this really reinforces that idea that we're using that joint attention not only to engage with others, but also to communicate our needs or communicate when we don't have the words yet. Turn taking. Okay, so this is super important. I've talked about this a little bit beforehand in terms of how some of these skills can lead up to turn taking. But of course, when we're playing with someone, one of these elements that we're trying to teach them is how do we reciprocally play with someone else? How do we engage in that back and forth and make it meaningful between me and this other person, right? So it's not just in this image between these 2 boys, it's not just one boy snatching the toy away from the other and being able to, you know, stack it onto the pyramid, but it's how do these 2 communicate with each other to say, hey, I'm putting this one on, you can do this one next, right? So here's where we're thinking about this concept of turn taking that's really the foundation for social communication. And it's very essential for building and maintaining relationships. When you think of, relationship between siblings, relationship, even like an intimate personal relationship, you are lending yourself in friendships. You are lending yourself. You're giving and taking, right? It's this back and forth flow, where you can see maybe individuals on the spectrum may have difficulties with this, because there is no back and forth. They have a difficulty in recognizing the cues of other individuals, right? So if you have someone who's on the spectrum, maybe playing with a neurotypical, maybe the neurotypical child, to request for their turn, will stick their hand out, or even make that joint attention, like looking at them, kind of like, okay, it's my turn now. But perhaps someone on the spectrum is not reading the facial cues or the physical cues. It might have a harder time in taking turns. So we definitely want to work with our children in order to take turns, and this can be modeling, verbalizing, and being able to say, okay, it's my turn, and then, taking the toy, and then you taking your turn, and then narrating when it's their turn and saying, okay, your turn, and then they pick up the toy and they put it in its place. When I'm thinking about this toy. But definitely we want to reinforce this concept of turn taking and this back and forth with our children when we're playing, and use any opportunity possible, whether it's with a construction toy like this one, or if we're playing pretend with a little cow and they're in the barn and they're climbing, maybe taking turns climbing. Wherever we can, we want to try to do this. So in terms of how to play and what does that look like when we're playing, we want to get on their level. Yeah, so even if this means getting down on the floor, getting outside, rolling around, we really want to make sure that we are letting our children know, I'm here to play with you in the way that you want to play. And if that means that I need to get on this floor, such as example with this father with his son, that they're racing cars, even think about the quality of the interaction, right? So if this dad was to say, okay, I'm going to play with you, but instead of getting on the floor with his son, he stays standing and he's kind of just pressing the button while he's standing, what signal is that giving the child? Is it kind of like, okay, are you engaging with me, or you're just like amusing me? So really making the child know that we're there for you, we're playing with you, we're going to get to whatever level they're at. We want to make sure to get close, right? And here, I'm thinking about, in this picture, you see the closeness between the child and the parent. This really helps them understand that we're engaged with them, we're there for them. Again, the example of this puzzle, if mom wasn't as close to child, maybe mom was a few feet away, how does the child know that mom is really playing with them, that mom is really engaged, right? So we want to make sure to get close to them, but in a certain space where the child is comfortable with, right? So maybe a child who's on the spectrum isn't as comfortable with touch, is very sensitive to touch. Maybe this position wouldn't work for them. So maybe sitting near them, making sure that we're in their line of vision, to make sure that they know that we are nearby. We're going to let our child lead. And this is something that's very, very important when we're talking about play. Going back to what I was talking about in the beginning, play is really a time for a child to explore and learn about their world. And when we're thinking about a play idea that a child may have, whether it's putting blocks one on top of another to build a structure, or whether it's this intricate story of the bad guys versus the good guys, we want to make sure our child is in the lead and really using this time to explore, right? Whether it's cause and effect toys, playing with the jack-in-the-box, or it's creating the story, like I said, of good guys versus bad guys, to see what happens when the good guys get the bad guys. We want to make sure not to overstep during the play, and allow the child to really flex that creativity and imagination. And now, when we're talking about perhaps individuals on the spectrum who maybe have a harder time with some of these abstract concepts in terms of imaginary play, being able to create those stories, there I can say we want to guide them, right? So maybe they're focused on building that block, building the block tower, building, and then they tear it down. And then they want to build it again, and then they tear it down. So we also don't want to allow for the repetitiveness behavior and allow them to expand their play. So maybe one time as they're building it and you're working on turn taking and eye contact as they're, you're putting the pieces, maybe one time they build it up and you knock it down in a different way, right? So exploring with the child with their needs, right? So you know that they want to knock it down. How else can we knock it down? Should we push it over? Should we take all the pieces apart? Helping them expand in those areas of creativity. And definitely just being silly, right? So obviously these blocks are not phones. So if you see a child being silly, being creative, using an item in a way that it's not intended to be, that's okay. And we want to encourage that creativity, and it's okay to be a little bit silly with them, right? So if they pick up a block to their ear and start start talking, you want to go ahead and do that too, right? And then going back to the skill of imitating, children imitate us, right? So if you feel comfortable in taking the lead and being silly and maybe picking up that block, the cylinder cone looking block, and pretending that it's a carrot, and yummy, and then maybe pointing it towards the child and seeing if they want to pretend to eat. This way we engage not only the silliness, but we're also expanding the child's pretend play skills. So now I'm going to talk a little bit about the pride skills and what are those and what are those useful for. So I'm going to put these here. So when we're thinking about pride skills, this is an acronym for praise, reflect, imitation, description, and enthusiasm, or enjoy, right? Enjoyment. And here, what these skills represent is really those skills to enhance the parent-child relationship. And going back to this concept of letting the child lead the play, letting the child feel like they can have this outlet for their creativity, for their thoughts and their ideas, when we're using the pride skills, we're really stepping back and allowing the child to take the lead and using these skills to help them further expand their play skills and then further enhance that relationship between the parent and the child. Pride skills is actually skills that's taught out of a bigger program, which is parent-child interaction therapy. And what it aims to do is enhance the parent-child interactions through the first phase, which is child-directed play, child-directed interventions, right? So we want to make sure that we're increasing our child's vocabulary, social skills, their compliance, even reduce some of the negative behaviors by using some of these pride skills. So I'm going to go through them each individually. So in terms of praise, so what is praise? This is a way for our children to know what are they doing that's right. How do they know? We want to let them know specifically, right? So great job for picking up the garbage. I like how you picked up your room. I'm so happy when you went to the bathroom by yourself. So we want to be very specific, because praise is letting the child know, yay, good job, you did it. You did this right. I want you to keep doing it. Praise in itself is a reinforcer for those positive behaviors that we're trying to see in our children, right? So whether it's independent skills, which is going to the bathroom on their own, being able to clean up after themselves, being able to organize their own stuff, we want to be able to use the praise. We also want, like I said, we want to be specific about what they're doing, and we can also praise them for certain behaviors or attitudes that they have, right? So if they're sitting down nicely, we want to praise them for that. And praise can look very differently. So the ones I've modeled so far are more verbal praises. For some individuals, maybe verbal praises might not be as easy or might not feel as natural to them. So there's other ways. There's use of physical touch. So this can be like a good, rub on the shoulder, pat on the back, a hug. You want to make sure to adapt the praise to what your child's needs are, right? So what is it that they truly respond best to? So this, again, can look like physical touch, verbal praise. Sometimes I've seen even using facial expressions, such as like smiling at the child, nodding at the child, like nonverbals, clapping, a combination. So we definitely want to be able to praise them appropriately in the way that they're going to best respond and understand that they're doing something well. The next step is reflect. And here, the skill is we're basically just reflecting back what it is that they're telling us, right? And this could be either completely repeating back what we just heard or paraphrasing it so that the child knows that they're being heard and they're being understood. And what's the best part about reflection is it can even help with some of the children who might have speech concerns where perhaps they're not using the right pronunciation. So maybe they say, I see a beautiful flower. Like they don't understand, they don't know yet how to pronounce certain letters or certain words. We can reflect back and say, yes, you see a beautiful flower. And this can be a very non-critical way of correcting the child and modeling for them how to appropriately pronounce something. So we definitely want to use reflections for that as well. And so, like I said, we're reflecting in terms of what it is that they're telling us during the play, if they're talking to us, and this will help them feel heard and understood. The next one is imitation. And again, I've spoken about this briefly before, but just to get into it and what it looks like during, when you're using these pride skills, you really want to imitate the appropriate behavior. So we're not just copying any behavior that we see. We want to make sure that we're imitating the socially appropriate or the positive behaviors. So if the child is playing nicely with a toy, and they're known for, like, maybe this child has a history of banging toys together and being very disruptive with toys. Maybe today they're playing very nicely and they're walking alongside, right? So if you're not using praise, you can also use imitation and grab your toy and copy them and walk right alongside them. And this does a couple of things. One, it encourages them to continue in those positive behaviors and to continue engaging in what you find appropriate. And two, it's almost like a spotlight on themselves, right? So you're really putting that spotlight and saying, hey, I see you, you're doing a great, I'm gonna do it too. And it feeds into this child-directed portion of play, where the child feels like they are taking the lead and you're imitating them and they still feel like they're in the lead. The next one is description. So here we're describing what the child is doing with their hands, right? So we're not describing what we see the character doing. So it's not, oh, the lion is drinking from the fountain. It's, oh, I see you're making the lion drink from the fountain. Again, really highlighting and making sure that the child feels noticed for the appropriate behaviors of what they're doing, especially if they're playing appropriately with the toys or exploring the toys in a new way that they hadn't before. We want to use description of what they're physically doing with the toy. And the last one, this one is enthusiasm or enjoyment, right? And here what we're doing is we're really just engaging with the child, using the eye contact, smiling, really being present for the child. And I know a lot of times I get feedback from parents when I teach these skills saying, well, enjoyment comes easy to me. And I have a good time with my child. And my question to that is, I think that, I say, I think that's great. I'm glad that you enjoy your time playing with your child. How does your child know that you're enjoying it? How can they tell? And this one is actually very important, especially when you're thinking about an individual on the spectrum who might not be able to read your social cues, might not be able to see that you're smiling and you're looking at them and you're engaging with them as a positive response to their play. So you want to make sure, again, to adapt this to what's appropriate for the child. So this could be verbalizing. I've taught parents sometimes to even verbalize, wow, Sally, I'm having such a fun time with you. This is so much fun. Really reinforcing the fun that you're experiencing. Laughing together, again, making eye contact, really engaging with the child, helping them feel like, okay, this is my time. I'm here with mom, I'm here with dad. We're having a really good time together. And this is you know, the thought behind this step is you really want to enrich that parent-child relationship by including more positive opportunities for connection, right? Instead of focusing maybe all the time that you spend with your child is disciplining or noticing the negative behaviors. We want to shift that perspective into more engagement, enjoyment with them, laughing, having a good time, letting our child know that we're having a good time with them. So overall, these skills, you know, all go together in terms of really enhancing, enriching that play with your child, that playtime with your child. And when we're thinking about playtime, and I know some of us are very busy in our day-to-day lives in terms of being able to manage our jobs, our homes, our other responsibilities that we need to do, where maybe, you know, an hour of play is a lot for us to engage with the child. So, you know, start small, maybe a couple minutes in the day. Some pick a time where we can definitely 100% be present for the child, even if it's just 10 minutes of your time. A lot of times I also encourage parents to pick a time to engage with their child when maybe they're not as tense or stressed out. We want to make sure we're coming into the play and using these skills when we ourselves are in a relaxed state, in a maybe a more positive state, because children will sense our frustration, they will sense our tension, and it might make it more difficult for these skills to come across as positive. So now I'm going to focus on talking about what not to do during play. So we don't want to include questions, right? We don't want to be constantly bombarding our children with, well, what is this? What is that? What are they doing? Where are we going? This can really take away from that child-directed piece, right? And it's almost like we're kind of overstepping in the child's space, especially if they're trying to create and invent play as they go. And this can also really impact that connectedness between the two of you. I've seen children get very frustrated with their parents who are asking them a lot of questions about the play, or asking them questions in regards to maybe counting how many chickens are there, how many dogs are there, and it takes away from the enjoyment. So we want to make sure to reduce the questions to none if possible. Commands as well, right? So again, this is really shifting it back to, is this child directed or is this parent directed? And I know this is very hard, and a lot of parents I hear struggle with this because we want to make sure that the child is exploring the toys properly and engaging in a productive play session, right? And who knows, maybe we'll see some negative behaviors and it's easier for us to give commands, but we definitely want to try to stay away from that, hold back a little bit. Again, if the child is engaging in some very dangerous behavior, that's where I suggest, yes, step in, go ahead. But in terms of giving commands when the child is engaging in a very mild, bothersome behavior, I would try to hold back a little bit. And negative statements too, right? So we want to make sure the child feels confident in what they're doing, and when we're giving them attention, we're giving them this space to lead. We don't want the negative statements to reduce their confidence and their independence and their ability to create on their own. Okay, so ignore. So what are we doing when we ignore? Very simple. We are not paying attention to any of the inappropriate behaviors that are not dangerous, right? So here we're looking at, you know, maybe the child is whining or being bossy, just things that they're engaging in that we know that they're trying to maybe get our attention, they're trying to escape from something, they're not really hurting themselves, they're not hurting others, they're not acting in a dangerous way. So we're just not going to pay attention to them. If your child is engaging in dangerous behaviors, you want to block it or you want to stop the play, right? So here we're looking at maybe aggressively throwing the items, like beaming toys at a sibling or at you, standing up on chairs, throwing chairs. We want to make sure to block it or just end the play at that moment if the behaviors escalate. And definitely something I want to add about ignoring and what happens when we ignore is we're going to see a spike in behavior. So I want to prepare all of you to see a spike in behaviors when we're using ignore. So I'm thinking about maybe a child who's used to whining when they don't get their way, right? So you're playing a game and they say, I want the pig. And you say, well, I'm playing with the pig. When I'm done, you know, in 1 minute, I can give it to you. And they start whining and whining and whining and whining, and you're like, and this is right, they're not hitting themselves, they're not hitting others, they're not throwing objects, they're just really sitting there and whining and getting really loud. So what can you do in this aspect, in this example? You ignore. You stay near the child, you sit, you wait without, you know, you're just looking away from them. You're making sure that you're not making any facial expressions, because maybe even laughter or looking at them or making eye contact with them is reinforcing. So they're going to continue to whine more. And what are you going to see with this example? The child's going to whine and whine and whine. And maybe the whining turns into it's going to, now they're like banging their fists. But again, they're not hurting themselves. They're kind of just banging their fists in anger. And you're going to see that spike up in behavior. And they're going to notice, look, mommy's not paying attention to me. Daddy's not paying attention to me. And then it's slowly going to come down. And you're going to re-engage with them once the behavior has gone down, meaning the whining has stopped, the banging of the hands have stopped, and it's really at a better place. And you say, okay, I see you're calm now. Let's continue playing. You have X amount of time left, and now it's your turn with Piggy. So yeah, so you definitely want to be prepared. When you ignore, you're going to see a spike in behaviors. So I'm coming down to the end of the presentation, and I think the main takeaway from here, and just some homework for you all, right? Some tasks, is to try to spend at least 5 to 10 minutes playing with your child each day. We really want to enrich that relationship and that connection between you and your child. And again, even if you only have 5 minutes between all of the tasks that you have to manage throughout the day, those 5 minutes that you are spending one-on-one time connecting with your child, that's really going to help your relationship with your child, and it's going to help reduce some of those negative behaviors, because now they're getting engagement from you when they're behaving in something appropriate. You want to make sure to use those pride skills, right? Try to get in some labeled praise, labeling what they do correctly, using those descriptions, using those reflections during each time that you're playing with them. You want to remember not to ask any questions, don't give any commands, or make any negative statements. We really want to help the child feel confident in expressing themselves and being independent and exploring the toys. You know, this is going to be hard at the beginning. And I can see a lot of challenges that come up between knowing when to use what skill, and knowing what is an appropriate behavior that you're looking for, and knowing how much to do in terms of ignoring and so forth. So it's going to be hard, but you know, it's going to come out a little more natural as you continue to practice. And I encourage you all to practice. You know, common questions that I get in terms of using the pride skills and how do I play with my child is, you know, what happens if, you know, I'm playing with my child, or sorry, what do I do if they have siblings? Can I include the siblings? You know, I would strongly recommend having individualized time for the child in order to better engage and use these pride skills with them. But I also understand that in a realistic world, it's very hard to play with one child and not have the other one want to come in and join. So what you want to do is you want to make sure to still engage with each individual child, and maybe even encouraging amongst themselves to do some of the turn taking, some of the joint attention, the imitation, some of the skills that we talked about in the beginning together as a family, and you providing the praise to each child when they are doing the appropriate behavior. And definitely intervening when things become physical or they escalate too quickly. I'm trying to think of another question I commonly get in terms of knowing when to use what skill. I've had parents ask me, you know, how do I know which one to do? You know, I'm going to say go with your gut. I think you could technically use all of the pride skills throughout the play session, and you can be praising one way, imitating them at the same time. Some of these you can do together at the same time, right? So I'm imitating the child walking, and I can say, wow, I really like how nicely you're walking your cow. So I want you to explore and see what you feel comfortable with, what works for you, and try out these pride skills as well. In terms of any other questions that I can think of that I get from parents, setting aside time, I think I spoke about this, but even if it's, if you can make it into a routine where the child knows when to expect it, right? So maybe your routine is you get home from work, you make dinner, you shower, and afterwards you dedicate 15 minutes of time, allowing the child to understand that routine and help them know that what's expected, right? So first, mommy comes in through the door, she makes, she says hi, she makes dinner, she showers, and then mommy plays with you. And even if it's helpful to have a timer so the child better understands when you have to transition out of play back into doing your tasks, laundry, cleaning up dishes, etc., something to help them understand, mommy can only play for so and so time, I'm going to put a timer, and really engaging in like, reinforcing the idea that this is a fun time for the two of us to spend together. We will have more time tomorrow if the child seems to be having difficulty with you leaving to return to your task. Again, thank you so much for participating, attending this video. And then if you have any more questions in terms of pride skills, I also did another video specifically discussing each pride skill and each do and don't skill. So feel free to check out that video, okay? Thank you so much, everyone. Have a great day.